And good evening. This is October 24th. This is the Rutland Town Planning Commission and a nice sized group here tonight, hopefully with lots of questions about the new ordinance for stormwater here in town. Let's start our meeting, if we would, with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we'll start with the public meeting, and just a reminder, it is being recorded, will be broadcast and available on Access TV, PEGTV, here in this area. And we have a very short presentation to start off with. After that, we'd like to open it up to any questions that you have. And when you are called upon, if you could just give your name, that would be great for the record. So this stormwater ordinance has been in effect since June 1st. And the select board passed it a couple months before that. And it did that, so there were a number of things it was looking at when it passed it. Management of stormwater is necessary to reduce stream channel instability, to reduce water pollution, siltation, sedimentation, local flooding. The management of stormwater is necessary to protect groundwater and the erosion of stream banks, water pollution, siltation, sedimentation, local flooding, and or groundwater contamination caused or contributed to by unmanaged stormwater runoff constitutes a public nuisance. So that's why it was passed. There are a couple entities that are responsible for this new ordinance, primarily Bill Sweet. He will be the, it's called the administrative officer for this. He's the administrative assistant to the select board. And he will be the front person for any questions that you have. But when we get down and actually have some projects on your land, if you have questions about that, you start with Bill. If there are permits to be filled out, Bill has those. And this group becomes, when there are decisions to be made about any of those permits, this group becomes the town stormwater commission at that point. And we'll be making decisions, hearing appeals, and things like that. So there are probably three things you're very interested in knowing about tonight. There's the Article 4, which is illicit connections and illegal discharges. There's the Article 5, which is about land disturbances, and Article 6 about what is meant by erosion and sediment control. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to the consultant who has been, the town has been working on for this ordinance and for a lot of the stormwater work that has been done here in the last couple of years. Andres Toriso, he's from Watershed Consulting up in Burlington. And he's had a very steady, heavy hand in this ordinance.
Great, thanks for having me. Appreciate everybody coming out tonight. So before I give you the overview of the ordinance and take questions, I just want to give you the history of why the town chose to do this, other than what Barbara just explained, the permitting history. So the town of Rutland, several years ago, was designated by the state of Vermont as what's called an MS4, municipal storm sewer, separate storm sewer community, MS4. And what that means is that the town had to develop a plan of action to control stormwater runoff in the town and submit that plan to the state to meet their permit requirement. And that plan has several different components to it. There are a number of different kind of stormwater runoff control commitments that the town needed to make. So one of those minimum requirements in the town's permit was to develop a stormwater ordinance. So this was really required under that permit requirement, and the MS4 permit did specifically say some of the criteria basically that's in this ordinance. So the ordinance is really kind of the minimum level that the state will accept, and so that's why that's kind of the history of it. And the reason that the town was originally designated by the state as this MS4 is because the Moon Brook and also Muzzy Brook, which drains into Moon Brook, doesn't meet the criteria that the state has for water quality. It's failing to meet the water quality standards that the state has because of uncontrolled stormwater runoff. So too much flow in the stream during storms, not enough flow in the stream during dry periods, and they measure the bugs in the stream. It's not meeting the criteria, so it's designated as stormwater impaired. So that's kind of what started this whole process. And so we actually initially developed the ordinance through a municipal planning grant that the town applied for and received, and we've gone through several iterations with the town, kind of working through this process, and we've come up with the plan that we have today. So the plan really has two main components, and one of the components, if you just direct your attention here to the screen, I'm just going to try to walk you through this because there's a lot of lines on this screen, and there's basically two key maps in the ordinance that are referenced. There's Appendix A and Appendix B. So this map that I'm showing right now is Appendix A. So if you look on this map, you can see the orange line here, the orange line here. Okay, those are the town boundaries. So over here, you can see my pointer. This is Mendon. This is the city. So everything within this area here is in the town. So within the town, you can see this blue boundary. So that is the whole watershed area of this impaired watershed. So Moon Brook, which is up here, and then Muzzy Brook, which is down here, which actually drains into Moon Brook down in here. So this whole area is part of this impacted area, this area where the state is really trying to focus their efforts. And so that's why if you look at these parcels, which are kind of bolded out in here, those are the areas within the town which are within the impaired watershed. So that slice of the map are the parcels which are impacted, which are covered under this Appendix A and Appendix B. Okay, I'll get into Appendix B in a minute, but what Appendix A basically says is that you are not allowed to be dumping anything into the stormwater system. So say changing oil in your car, going out to the street and dumping the waste into the stormwater system, which is then carrying that down into the stream. That's not allowed. You're not allowed to be dumping, grass clippings into the storm drain, dumping sediment. So it's what's called an illicit discharge ordinance. No sewage into the stormwater system. So really things that are really common sense things that you just, now it is explicitly stated in the ordinance that that's prohibited activity within
Andres?
that area.
What are the illicit connections?
So illicit connections, right, would be, sometimes we find that a laundry machine may be hooked up to the stormwater system. So, and a lot of times, that could be something that is not intentional, but, there's a plumbing mistake or whatever, and so that does happen occasionally. So that is an example of illicit connection. Another example of illicit connection is somebody's toilet or sink, for example, instead of hooked up to the sewer system, is hooked up to the stormwater system. And that actually also happens sometimes by mistake. But that's, the town has been working to identify those areas and then eliminate those areas. Through this same MS4 permit, the state has required the town to actually go out and try to find some of these areas and then fix them. So that effort's kind of underway, but really the ordinance now is saying nothing new like that that's allowed within this area.
We do have a few more chairs in here. We've got some more in the closet for you folks want to come in and sit down. Sorry, Andres.
It's all right. So for those that just came in, I don't know if you, just to quickly summarize, the map that I'm showing right now is the Appendix A area. So the area right here, which is bolded, is the area within the town that is subject to Appendix A in the ordinance, which is basically means that there's no illicit connections to the stormwater system. No dumping of oils, greases, lawn clippings, sediment, no connection of a sink to the stormwater system. So nothing other than stormwater should go in the stormwater system. So the less straightforward part of the ordinance and more restrictive part of the ordinance is Appendix B. So Appendix B is specifically the area. So if we look at the same map, you can see these areas right up in here at the top of the screen, right down in here. These are areas that are highlighted in orange. So those are areas within 50 feet of the top of bank on either side of Moonbrook and Muzzy Brook. So several properties abut the stream. And within those areas shaded orange, there are some specific requirements in terms of land disturbance, vegetation clearing, creation of new hard surfaces like a driveway or walkway within 50 feet from the top of bank. And so basically any land development, any clearing within 50 feet of the top of the bank is regulated through the town process. And that's where if the homeowner wants to take on a project within 50 feet of the top of the bank, there's now a process in place where there's an application that needs to be completed describing kind of where your property is, kind of the nature of your project, and that's submitted to Bill. And it's reviewed, and that activity is either approved or denied by the
Stormwater Commission.
Stormwater Commission. Right. So just some of the examples of some things that people might be doing: cutting of vegetation. Say, so the ordinance is not going to allow you to clear new vegetation right up to the edge of the stream. There's some specific requirements in there about not clearing trees which are greater than 3 inches diameter. There's also some specific language in there about creating, say, like a driveway or a house or a garage within that 50-foot zone from the stream. So that kind of activity, if you're planning on doing any of that activity, you should check in with Bill, and so the town can be aware of the scope of that, and then you can figure out if it's an activity that could be allowed under the ordinance. And some of the activity actually will be allowed, and it will only require you to do these basic erosion control measures. If it's an allowed activity, it would mean that, for example, you couldn't just strip the land and leave it bare. You would have to install like a silt fence, a barrier so that the sediment can't wash into the stream. And you have to have a plan for basically, revegetating that area. So anybody that's been on a construction site, it's all the standard practices that you use to control erosion. The state actually has a guidebook with all these standard practices that people use to control erosion, and that's referenced in here. It's called the Low Risk Site Handbook, and it has guidance for homeowners on things like putting in silt fence or stabilizing, with gravel or whatever, an area where you're working, so that you're basically not creating a huge mess and creating a bunch of sediment which is going to go into the stream and make the conditions worse in the stream. So those are really, the Appendix A and Appendix B are the two key things to reference in the ordinance. And that's basically it. I don't know if the town has anything to add to that, but we can just take questions on it, if that was a good summary.
We've reached out with a flyer and a couple of letters, but there may be some of you or some other property owners who might not know if they're exactly in the watershed or along that stream buffer area. So we can, you can call Bill anytime with that question. We're talking with Andres earlier this evening about maybe putting a web map up there, so you can just go right to your parcel or your property and find out whether it's in there. So that's one of the more basic questions. Does this apply to me or not?
To, name a couple of specific streets to make sure we're oriented here.
In terms of the Appendix B area,
Yes.
I
think
can't,
I
I
know
can't
where I
remember.
am.
I can't remember. I don't know. Can you get anybody help me on
Stratton
that?
Road.
Stratton Road.
Right, and Cold River Road to about a little bit beyond the hospital.
Oh, in terms of the whole impact, the whole area. Yeah.
Yeah, and then,
You have two areas, north and south, and you said that cursor right now is
So
on
right
one of
here,
them, which is, I think, close to my house, but I don't think it's my development.
right.
But others of us here are. So I was wondering what street is that?
The northern one is near like Gleason Road. It crosses Town Line Road right on the boundary there.
Right. This is Cold. What's the? Is it Cold River Road that
Yes.
comes
yeah,
up there?
yeah,
I think that's
that
it.
Cold
It's-
River, yeah.
I think that area actually goes, kind of meanders right by Cold River Road. Right in through here.
Appendix B is the more restricted of the two, right?
Yeah, Appendix B is the area in just those areas shaded in orange. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, that's. I mean, Appendix A is really just common sense kind of. You know,
But there are more people affected in A
Right.
than there are infected in B.
definitely.
Must be more questions. If you received a letter in September, it didn't differentiate whether you were in the
A or
Appendix A area or the Appendix B. We lump those together. So we can tease those out for you. Bill can help you or try to figure that out tonight.
This letter in this session is quite helpful. But if I decided I wasn't going to respond to these meetings and didn't come, how was I supposed to know that any of this was taking place? If it's all that important, are you actually going to have to knock on doors?
Well, we might have to. I mean, we've tried to put things on the town website as soon as it passed, and we've put all of the letters and the flyer that we sent out there. We tried to do some things in the circle to alert people. We've had one other public meeting. I think it was in July.
Yeah.
So we've tried to get the message out. We won't stop trying to get the message out because
I didn't bring it up because I didn't think it was important, because I think it is. But it seems to me everybody should have a chance to say, this is where I live, and I'm still not certain where I live here.
Well, and that's why it's hard on a map like this to zoom in, because I don't have the road names aren't on. But what we were talking about before is if there's a very simple way to, if you've ever been on like Google Maps where you just kind of you could type in your property and it would zoom
Well,
to
I've
your
seen
house.
that, yes.
We could put these layers right on there so that you could just go to the town website, put in your address, and then it would tell you right away if you are where you are, and what parts of your property are within those areas. Which I think would probably be the easiest way to do it.
Is it possible to make a revision of Appendix A and B with the streets labeled? I mean, surely you must have the technology and the resources to be able to do that. Laying out addresses and things like that. Or at least certain neighborhoods and whatnot. Just something to throw out there into the atmosphere.
Yep.
Barbara, let me
it may
comment.
be too crowded to do every street, because that's a pretty
Well, I understandably so, but if there was a way to label where Stratton Road is, for instance,
Mhm.
I'm talking about the major roads, you know.
Okay.
So not the subdivisions, if you will, of where I live on Hitzel Terrace, but you know, just the
Barbara, can
Okay.
I
generically
comment?
speaking.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because this is our first attempt at making sure that the public is aware of what is happening in terms of having a forum. There are other things that we've considered in terms of making it a little bit more user-friendly, but that's going to take more time. So this forum this evening is basically to make sure that anybody that might be in the affected area has an opportunity to come out, and there'll be other work that the Planning Commission is doing as the Stormwater Commission to refine some of the questions that you're raising. But we wanted, there were several ways that we could have approached this, and we felt that the most efficient was to make sure that information got out through the mail to folks, and that we held the the informational meeting so that people could be informed, because this all came together very quickly, caught the Planning Commission a little bit by surprise itself. And so what we've done is tried to have a couple of meetings where we could identify those who would be affected. Our first attempt, we did send out letters for the 50 within
Yeah, we
in
mentioned
Appendix
that,
B?
Dana.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So in the meantime, there is Bill Sweet, who's available by phone or, by email. If you need to know, right now, whether you're in in either one of those areas that fall under this ordinance, he can help. He can look that up for you. Just give him a call or just shoot him an email. He's right here all the time. He's back there.
I'm Chuck Corey. I'm just curious I think it's Section A is the larger area, right?
Yep.
And with the ordinances, you referred to as common sense, and I agree with you. Why wasn't that made a town-wide ordinance? In terms of, you don't want stuff going into the... Why not just have it for the whole town?
It is, well,
Andres, we do have a select board member here in attendance, Mary Ashcroft.
Not our,
I'm married.
Hi, Chuck. How are you? It was a decision that the full board made that this is a town that does not have zoning, and the towns, there is opposition to a lot of regulation. So our decision was to keep it as basic and as narrow in scope as we could, and that's
I
why
can
the whole
understand
town
that
is-
where you might, avoid unsettling a few people, but it seems like it's a missed opportunity from an environmental perspective when it's such simple stuff, really. I mean, who's going to want that stuff, everybody knows not to do that, right? It just seems like it should be town-wide, that's all. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Chuck.
Do you have another comment, and then the woman behind you? Or you?
Yeah, the leaves are coming down and they're going to clog my culverts. So should I tell the neighbor on the other side of the street to take care of your own leaves? So they're coming through and they're plugging up on my side and flooding my ditches. I mean, this is a minor gripe that I have, and I just clean out the leaves and the water drains away down to Muncie Brook eventually. So, I mean, I don't think I'm within 50 feet of any riverbank, so do I have any special concerns, or do they just...
no,
Take
no,
the
not
leaves
within
out.
yeah. Just you can remove the leaves.
And the storms have been hard on my trees, and I've had to remove some. I didn't need any permits to remove broken trees or...
No, and
dead
there
trees
is, and there is a exemption for dead or diseased vegetation, even if you are within that zone, that Appendix B zone, you can remove dead or diseased vegetation.
Is that something that needs to be brought to your attention prior to removing dead or disease?
What I would suggest, I think, until the town gets comfortable regulating this, is that if there's any work at all planned
Within
50 feet of the stream, I would check in with Bill to go
And this
to go
might
through it.
seem like a silly question, but you had said something about grass clippings.
Right.
It was over here. And the brook runs right through the edge of my property.
The backyards of a number of properties, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So mowing, I mean,
Yeah, mowing I mean, mowing an existing lawn is fine. There's
Okay.
there's language in terms of increasing your lawn within like 10 feet of the stream, is an issue with, but in terms of just maintaining existing lawn area,
Okay.
it's fine. I mean, really the challenge with grass clippings is the big lump of grass clippings that has a lot of nutrients in it, which you're trying to keep out of the stream. So it'd be better to never dump that into a storm drain or dump it into the brook. It would be better to, if you're going to dump it somewhere, kind of spread it out in an area where it's not going to be washed or into a catch basin that's going to flush down the stream. Yeah.
So I had a question about if you live in the Appendix A or whatever in that area, you said, so you don't have any storm drains, so what are you asking us to do? You don't have any.
No, nothing. I mean, if you don't have any, it really wouldn't necessarily even be a storm drain. It could be a ditch in front of your house with a culvert, which anything like that, any conveyance where when it rains you get that stormwater flowing, there you would not be allowed to basically be dumping anything into that conveyance, which could then be washed to the stream. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be like a collection pipe. It could also just be like an open channel.
Just natural runoff, you're saying?
Natural
So
runoff
there's
is
no-
fine, but it's
okay.
more so
All right.
oils and grease, taking sediment and throwing it in the ditch so that it washes away, kind of thing. Yeah.
I did notice where residential or commercial fertilizers were addressed. That Lawn Master, I think, is one industry that spreads on lawns. Is there any particular reason why that's not addressed? Or I assume it's acceptable, of course, in terms of stormwater runoff.
I mean, it's definitely, fertilizers are certainly an issue. I think it isn't addressed. I think the improper use of a fertilizer could constitute an illicit discharge. For example, like if you're washing out, a can of fertilizer and then dumping that into the storm drain, I think that would be included in the prohibited activity. Normal use of fertilizer, according to manufacturers' recommendations, I think is acceptable. Yeah.
How about like car washing?
That's a good question. Yeah, that's a good question. So that is not a car washing is tricky actually in terms of whether or not it's illicit discharge. It's not prohibited. The state does have some recommendations for car washing. One of them being if you're washing, it would be great. It's ideal to have that wash water diffuse into the grass versus running down the driveway and where it's going to go right into a storm drain. So car washing is acceptable, but there is some things that can be done to kind of mitigate the impact of that. Again, you don't want the suds just going right into the river. You want it to diffuse and then hopefully just kind of soak into the ground and kind of break up before it gets to the river. So.
You know, he was talking about his leaves. I've got culverts both sides of me, and I today went out and I raked all my leaves up because I said, oh, they're not supposed to be going down. So is the town going to help us out with maybe cleaning these areas, these specific areas out, so that we're not, as homeowners, taxed? Taxed such as all the labor that we have to put into this?
I don't know if have there been.
I'm gonna rake your lawn, no ma'am.
Is the highway
But we do have, I
department
think
gonna come
the point is well
and just
made.
do the culverts maybe and the swales or the
We
ditches?
do, I mean, Byron does keep an eye on culverts that are ours, that are within our right of way and training it. But is it going to be a program to go out? I've not heard of any plan to do that. But point's well taken. There is a place at the transfer station where you can bring leaves, branches,
They do.
yard trimmings. So.
I did 4 bags today.
Good.
They'll be going Saturday.
So just to I was curious about your question about car washing, and it is, if you read through the ordinance, section 4.3, there are some specific exemptions, and that is, so that's permitted. And so it specifically is non-commercial washing of vehicles, swimming pool draining, firefighting activities. Those are things that are acceptable.
What happens if my pool lets go? I have an above ground pool.
Hopefully it won't.
What happens if my pool lets go because it's right above the stream? Am I gonna get fined?
No.
No. Unfortunately.
Unless you do it regularly.
Another thing that is probably
Control over
common
that.
is the connection to a stormwater system for, say, a sump pump. So uncontaminated pumped groundwater, foundation or footing drains. So any drains that you have around your house, that is permitted to be discharged to the stormwater
It's
system.
permanent.
Yes, as long as it's not contaminated water.
Any other questions? Fred, you've been quiet.
Done an application yet?
No, I don't think so. We
I
have.
think Penny Brook, I don't care about any of this.
There will become a day when it will be.
It probably is a matter of time.
Well, that poses a pretty good question for me then, because I'm supposedly attached to a wetland that feeds into Tenny Brook, but I'm on this watershed. How's that possible?
If you're right on the boundary, definitely could take a look at that, because I mean, this is, I wouldn't say that that blue boundary is it's
That's
close,
a
it's
state,
close.
That's a state map, and so is the one that says I'm in a wetland that feeds into Tenny Brook. So which one do I go with?
I think you could take a closer look at it if you have some work that is planned. It would make sense to take a close look at that. If you're out, you're out. Yep. I mean, I would say that the boundary could always be revised if there was.
They already revised it once for the wetland.
There are situations like that where
Yeah, there are. Yeah, it comes up all the time.
overlapping.
Yep. Okay.
Anything else? Does anyone want to try to find their property?
On that thing? I don't think so.
So if we are Sam Carrera and I live on Coal River Road, if I'm still uncertain about the location or about questions that I have about, especially about trees, is he available to come out and sit down with me and take a look at the property? Or maybe I'm not looking at the right gentleman. I think I am.
We potentially would do site visits once a permit is filed, but I'm not sure if that's something we would do to review it. We haven't really discussed that part of what that's going to be. I mean, if you want to come in, certainly we talk about it, but I think if the permit is filed and there's questions about it, then a site visit would be in order, but we haven't discussed like going around and like doing like surveys of property ahead of time for things like that.
But if you wanted to find out if he had his parcel,
Right.
he could at least clarify what zone he's in.
Absolutely.
Well,
So you would know.
He's probably definitely in Appendix A, but does Muzzy Brook run through your property or within 50 feet of an edge of it?
Runs right through the property.
Well,
So
then
you're
you're in
so then you're
Appendix
within
B.
B.
I think I know where I am, but
At
I'm not
least-
certain.
Yeah.
At least when I go
At
home
least
tonight, I
50
think
feet
I'll go the
within
right
Brook
direction.
Edge, right, is Appendix B.
Right.
So if you're having a project done that's not within 50 feet of the brook, you should be fine to follow Appendix A rules. However, if you have a project that you're doing within 50 feet of the brook, then you need to follow Appendix B rules. Is that an accurate statement?
Yep.
And in order for us to actually do the work and send out the mailings, we had to identify parcel numbers And we spent the better part of a whole meeting, I think more than a whole meeting, doing just that. So Bill is well versed in understanding which parcels, because we had to do an alignment between parcel numbers and addresses. So Bill, you could come in, bring your address, and Bill could show you exactly on the map where your parcel is located and answer any questions relative to where you're located and why. And at that point in time, if you wanted to do a permit, then Bill would bring it back to us and we would proceed from there.
I'm as concerned over trees. Which trees I can cut and which trees I can't cut. Do you deal with trees?
Yeah, trees are specifically, so it's any trees greater than 3 inches diameter within 50 feet cannot be cut.
50 feet at the top of the bank.
Top of the bank. So if you go to that top of the bank where it starts going down the stream and measure back 50 feet, you're not going to, if you, it's not that you may be able to do it, but that could be that's a permitted activity. So that's something that you would need to.
What impact
clear with
does
the
a
town.
tree have on the composition of a brook?
The trees are cut, the shading, they keep the stream cool. They keep it, the pollutants from making its way to the stream in the first place from say a lawn, from the road. So it gives it a buffer.
Erosion control?
It's erosion control, the roots of the stream, the roots of the tree, holds the bank in place.
Well, since no, you go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Since I've lived there, half a dozen trees have come down, and nobody said to me, "You got to plant new trees."
No, you wouldn't necessarily.
Wouldn't necessarily.
If they've come down and the dead or diseased trees can be removed, you can remove those.
Even within that 50-foot
Yeah.
buffer, you can.
Yeah, if they're dead or diseased, yeah.
The thinking there is that
not
probably
functional.
new growth will come up.
Right.
And it's not serving its purpose if they're dead or diseased anyway. They could,
And trees
That
and
would-
vegetation within 50 feet?
Well, what kind of vegetation? You're talking.
Blackberries.
Sorry?
Blackberries.
Yeah, I think you'd probably want to, if you had a kind of a plan that you were thinking, I think it would kind of depend on what you're doing. We're kind of getting into a little bit of a gray area there.
Yeah.
It's like one
What I was
bush,
thinking about.
maybe not a big deal, but
If they're existing, are they grandfathered? Existing blackberries, are they grandfathered?
I think that's vegetation. I think it's, yeah.
Like an eighth of an acre of them.
Mhm.
And they're very close to the brook.
Mhm.
But I'd like to get the weeds out, and I've been told I need to make rows. So that would be something I would need to come
I would,
here
yes.
first.
Yep, and just so the town can kind of understand the whole scope of what you're doing,
Okay.
where it is, look
Just
at the
curious.
regulation. Yeah, yeah.
How do you plan to deal with lawbreakers?
I don't. No, there's a
Police force.
Do you want to talk about the process, or do you want to?
Well, we haven't had any trial runs yet. We haven't taken the car out for a ride on that.
we're assuming good intentions right now.
And Bill, in addition to all his other duties with this ordinance, would be the enforcement officer. And there are provisions, there's a whole section in here about enforcement, how that works and how it can be taken to court, how it can be appealed and all that. And that's pages 9 through most of 11.
Perfect.
We haven't memorized it yet.
Thanks for coming.
Anything else? Well, thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your help. for coming.
Hopefully this
Appreciate
was
it.
of help, and please let us know if you'd like another one of these meetings, or if you need something out in your neighborhoods. us to come to you.
You're an appendix. Sorry, I didn't realize that was. Yeah. No, just don't dump anything.
Gotta go back to my other meeting.
Otherwise, you're good.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks.
Always helpful to have you here.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
It's somewhere right around here.
Big yellow house, bunch of fencing on the end of the
So
track.
then you're not in either. Yeah, you'd have to be.
No,
You'd have to be.
we're not there.
Okay.
So if you're down here.
We're down when you hit the corner up there.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
West of
It's in
that.
my car if you want to see it.
We're located right in front of the
I'm
bridge.
confused as to why we got dragged into this.
Yeah, but you're sure you're.
I hope it doesn't go right through.
Hey, Bill?
I'm right on Shillington Avenue.
You're that lady?
Yeah. I'm the one with all the dogs.
Can you pause it?
Do you do that for a job?
Okay.
Yeah, so the question Andy had was why the Appendix B is just highlighted on the main Muzzy Brook or Moon Brook and not, Muzzy and Moon, but not the little tributaries which may feed into those streams. And I mean, I think the answer is that it's really how the state had defined the critical areas that the state really wanted the town to focus on were the actual impaired water bodies themselves, which is the Muzzy and the Moon, and there was not a need in terms of the state MS4 permit that this whole reason we're doing this for the town to go beyond that. You certainly could have. You could have basically identified. I mean, that it's a little trickier because then obviously those little areas might not be mapped.
Define them even, yeah.
You know, and so you'd have to, to do it right, you'd probably want to go out first and really map them all so people knew what's a stream and what's a ditch, and, it gets a little more complicated, but that's...
But they've done mini watersheds and decided the sizes of those. But for the purposes of this, it's just these two streams, the main stems of the...
Right.
Okay.
Right, where the state wanted you to apply the stricter
Okay.
buffer regulations. So.
Good question, Andy.
Yep. All right. Have a good night. Thanks.
Okay.
Thanks, Andres.
Safe travels.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Back to our regular meeting now. And the approval of the agenda for October 24th. I believe we'll have, you're representing,
Oh, I'm representing Edmund Kesslering.
okay.
Or Peter and Rhoda Kunzler.
Okay, great, thank you. Yeah. And we're expecting maybe a little bit later in a few minutes, the other boundary line adjustment proposal. Under announcements and news, we'll like to talk a little bit about, like to add a short conversation about the committee for the transparency policy and also our start time. 6:30, we did a pilot 3 meetings of that, and we can talk about that.
Under old business. Is that what you said? Or under announcements? What do you do?
Yeah, under announcements and news, I think. Anything else that anyone want to make a motion to?
I'll make a motion that we approve the agenda with the changes, or with the additions, I guess.
Second.
All those in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Any public comment out here, or you? I'm sorry.
For me?
Yeah.
We meant to come to the stormwater thing. I just forgot. I was outside.
Oh, okay. And is there a comment over there?
The new rules aren't very smart. Whoever made them wasn't using their head.
Oh, well, we
Or maybe they were just smacking it on paper.
we try our best. We might have to.
I mean, our objection to it, from what we read and what we saw, is we live in the woods. So, like, if you say I'm all for any sort of, no pesticides, no herbicides, no chemicals being dumped in here. That makes total sense. But when you start to say you can't disturb the soil, we have a dog. She digs holes. We live in the woods, so there's no way we can ever keep up with the amount of leaves in our yard. That's just not possible. We compost in our yard, so like any sort of yard waste gets composted in the yard and all of that kind of stuff. And I don't understand why that would be restricted when we have state composting rules that are going into effect. All that's good nutrition for the soil. So
Yeah, I don't-
that's my concern based
Okay.
on what I've seen.
Yeah. We talked earlier about not letting materials and debris like leaves into anything that's draining into stormwater infrastructure, you know, culverts or storm drains, things like that. So, I mean,
Our yard's on like a 30-degree angle, so that's still. I mean, like we don't have any direct outlets, but there is a culvert under our driveway. At the bottom.
Does the Muzzy Brook or the Moon Brook directly flow through your property?
No.
Okay, so if you're
We're up off of Killington Avenue, so we're in that part.
okay,
of
so
town.
you really if I guess I can
Yeah, go ahead.
if you are in, I live on Deborah Drive. I'm in what's called Appendix A. And it really comes down to, more than anything else, common sense. No dropping, no disposing of any oils or greases or things like that. The normal everyday things you've done within that area, and it sounds like you're within Appendix A as well, really doesn't apply unless you're dumping something specifically. So, for an example, at my house, I think I would be strictly business as usual. There would be nothing I would do between my grass clippings, my dog dirt, or any other thing, or composting. It's only if you're within 50 feet of the top of the bank of Muzzy Brook or Moon Brook that you follow into a more stringent kind of a thing, kind of a criteria. So I think if you're outside of that, then you would be fine. Well, I believe also, in speaking this, that we're probably going to end up with another public hearing, possibly, or a public meeting.
Information, yeah.
And certainly, Andreas, you just missed him, was really the guy to throw some specifics at, because we're kind of at the beginning stages of this. But I think within Appendix A, which I believe you are, you really pretty much business as usual, just common sense, and it sounds like you're all over that. You wouldn't dump pesticides, none of us would. We wouldn't dump oils on our property that could potentially leach into those waterways. So
it's primarily geared for just people dumping into a drainage, the drainage system, what's draining off your land and going into one of those streams.
So if you're a property owner within 50 feet of the top of that bank and you have storm drains, you've got further concerns and further things that you can't do. You be beyond that, what you're in, it's limited, other than real common sense type of stuff.
Now, the other thing I saw in here that said that you need to get a permit to cut a tree down.
That's within 50 feet.
Within 50 feet. Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
That's if you're in those yellow,
Appendix
one
B.
of those yellow areas there. B.
And I think we all kind of sympathize. I got the same letter, and it definitely makes you think. But you really are within an area that is much less stringent, and that you don't have to follow those real specifics. If you start, when you read through that, knowing that you are now in Appendix A and not in B, I think it'll be much more clear.
Okay, that's good to know. And also, I mean, just as a general public comment for the board, I would love to see more stringent things about herbicides and pesticides anyway going down. Like, our neighborhood's a lot of people do it, and we are all on well water. And, we all have animals and all that kind of stuff, and that stuff is known to be carcinogenic. It tends to be rated by the American Pediatric Society, the EPA, all of those kind of things is a carcinogen, especially for animals and children. So it's something that I would love to see, not having everybody spray their lawns.
That's a select board issue rather than ours, right?
Yeah,
'Cause they're the
but
ones
I mean,
who
I saw
pass
that in here,
ordinances.
and I was happy to see that. But
It's something we can pass along to the select board and pass along to our legislators if you
yeah.
feel that strongly. Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Sorry, you missed the big show.
Yeah, no, it's
You're welcome.
Thanks for coming.
Okay, down to the boundary line adjustment with the Kunstler property, and we've got, Bill, all of the forms filled out.
All there.
We've got a letter of transmittal from the engineers which includes the survey and the letter from Ray Page. I'm not sure who Ray Page, but I'm sure you'll be explaining.
He's the
That's the
surveyor
surveyor.
who did prepare the boundary
Yeah.
surveyor.
And here,
And the last attachment actually is now void. Its situation has changed. There should have been, I believe, a third one with that submittal or that transmittal.
a third letter.
Yeah.
I've got one dated February 27th.
Okay. Yep. No, that's the one from Ray Page. That is. Yeah, that one is still valid.
That is-
There was a third one.
Letter. Okay, 6. Okay, yeah, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Okay.
For the record.
Pull up the chair. Okay. I'll just put this. This will work here. I can work with it right here. So my name's Ian Dwyer. I work with Edmund Kesslering Engineers. I'm representing Peter and Rhoda Kunzler. We're seeking approval for boundary line adjustment. They have 2 lots at the end of Tamarack Lane. I believe they are in total approximately 170 acres. And if you, I guess, open up the survey prepared by Ray Page. I wonder why we didn't have the.
It's set right on those 2 chairs if you want over there.
Oh, okay, okay. The property will be, there are 2 properties in subject. One would be Lot A, sure. Lot B. So I'll start with Lot A. That's on the westerly side of the plan. So that would be, it contains a single-family home, and what the project intent to do with Lot A is to take, it's not very well displayed in this one here. I can maybe doesn't rip, but you guys won't be able to see it on this side, so I'll kind of try to explain it here. They'll be taking it from 12 acres to 4.6 acres. There are 2 existing iron pins that we will be proposed to be placing a straight property line between those 2 iron pins and convey this area over to Lot B. And in that process, we're also looking to create an easement for our proposed wastewater disposal system, extending from the house out to an area that has been deemed suitable for potential wastewater replacement. And
Is that permitting been finalized?
And so we are seeking permitting from the state. The potential buyer of Lot A has investigated the wastewater system, and they have a licensed designer working on this. They believe it's showing signs of failure, so they are under design for a replacement system, and that replacement system would be inside of the proposed easement that we're creating. And so for part of the condition of this approval, we're asking that that the town permit be conditional upon approval that this state permit does get approved for both the subdivision of this lot and the replacement wastewater system. They're both permit required activities.
Are you up against a closing date?
And
Is that the reason why?
I do not believe that there is a solid closing date. I know that it is definitely it is under progress, and it is hopefully coming to closing before the end of the year. I believe was the time frame, general time frame. So it's a recent discovery on the client's behalf, is that it's a failed wastewater system, but we had the proposed easement already in place, and now that will just be utilized sooner rather than later, essentially, is what we're requesting.
The easement is what again?
So it would be extending from Lot A out into an area that it was on Lot A, and it's going to be conveyed to Lot B, just for the installation and maintenance. A wastewater disposal system, likely a mound system.
So can you just summarize, if you said it, I missed it?
Yeah.
Lot A is currently at 4.65 acres?
Currently at 12.2 acres, and proposed to be reduced to 4.6 acres.
12 to 4.6.
And the other,
Yeah.
and what's left over will be added to Lot B to become 165
And
acres?
yes, so Lot B would go from approximately 158 acres to 165 acres in this condition. And another thing that we're asking for is a waiver for the requirement for performing a boundary survey on the entire property. Back in 2013, the original Lot A was created, and under this condition, it was essentially because due to its large nature and its lot, it's quite expensive for the councilors to have the entire property surveyed by a licensed land surveyor. But it has been found that there are other surveys in the area that provide reliable information. So we're requesting basically the same waiver that was approved in 2013.
I don't see a need for surveying all that property. It's not necessary, and typically in the past we haven't. When you get something that's 100 or 200 acres in size, if you want to take out a 50-acre piece, typically you just survey the 50 acres and not have to survey the remaining part. I myself would say no, that we don't have to survey. They don't have to survey all of it.
I remember when they came in last time. As a counselor, right?
Mm-hmm.
They came last time and we waived that because most of it was surveyed as part of that whole lot, and we waived it to change that, to make that boundary line adjustment last time.
In 2013.
2013,
And he's owned the property, do you know, Ian?
I'm not aware. It's been since definitely before 2013.
Says on here, no,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, it says March 27, 2008 is the date on here.
Okay, so
At least since then.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean,
And
so
I
there
think
is a survey with his name on it.
Not of the entire thing.
Not of the entire
No,
thing.
no.
Only in the subject area. The subject area is not increasing. It's actually even getting smaller.
But previously, there's something on record?
What we're not seeing is there was a survey that looked different from what we're seeing here.
Yeah.
And it's part of what's on your small drawing, I guess, right there.
Yeah, I'm not too sure why you guys didn't have. I thought we had dropped this sheet off to you as well. I'm sorry, because it does display the entire size of the property and basically just the
But
area.
it was what, 12 acres or something the first time around?
Yep.
That they did?
Yep. So
Why don't you point that out to everybody? I'm pretty familiar with it.
So Lot A was only this parcel right along here. Oh, sorry. Following this thick black line out to here, and now we're basically going to be taking this plot of land and bringing it over to Lot B.
Right.
And all of these areas have been surveyed by a licensed surveyor. Just not everything else along this end by the same surveyor.
By the same surveyor, okay.
Yes.
So, Howard, are we saying that we would want a survey of the new Lot A and the portion that was added to Lot B? Is that what you're?
Well, I think what they've got here covers it. The map that he handed out. This shows the Lot A, so-called,
Right, so we had that the last time, Howard, if I remember right.
Yep.
We got that, didn't show the whole remaining 160 acres or whatever, but it showed that area that was dealt with last time.
Right, yep.
Then now it's just being added into, it's just being changed, the lot line, into the same thing that we already looked at 6 years ago, so there's not a lot of difference to what we did then to now, whether or not we want to go a different directions.
And already on record, on file in the town office are those maps, that one there, and everything is there, so all I think what we really need is this new map showing the new plat, showing the showing parcel A and
in the easement.
Just what we have, yeah. This fits
Because
right
that
in.
will be the bounded property, the new property for A. And that's what we want to see. So that's on file. Everything else becomes part of B, which we already have surveyed as one part of A and other part of B. Is that
From
correct?
different surveyors from different periods of time.
Right. But if anything else were to be subdivided out of B, then we would need the whole survey to be done.
Correct.
Right? So if anything else after this, just for future reference, that whole area would then have to be surveyed to have an accurate accounting of any subdivision that would occur subsequent to this.
I don't.
Is that, no?
I understand.
Okay.
No, not,
Enlighten me.
not to survey the whole thing.
Right, right, just,
I mean-
just the portion that's been taken out.
Well, I think Dana's talking about in the future, should the owner of the 165 acres
Correct.
decide to subdivide,
That's right.
at that point, they would need to
That's all I'm
survey
saying.
the entire
Thank you.
piece of property. And that,
Well, I'm not sure about
I guess
that.
it depends on where it takes place.
Where it takes place. Let's say they want to go another 20 acres from where they are here. Do they really need to go the rest of the 100 and whatever acres? If they're doing it, depends on what they're doing, I think.
If it's happening on I think it would be the northwestern corner, something up
probably.
higher in the northern part, and it was a survey that was done a long time ago and a plat didn't exist, then maybe we would choose to at that time, I would guess.
Right. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, I would think you're right.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
Thank you. All right. I just wanted to make sure that I understood what the ask was now and what the implications would be for any future subdivision.
Right.
It's not
No,
a boundary
it's
line
not affecting
adjustment.
any other future subdivisions, it's just for this one in particular, just due to its location, in recent surveys.
So what we're saying now is that what we have here, which is the new Lot
The
A,
new Lot A.
and the portion that's being subdivided is sufficient for what the request is. Is that my understanding?
That's the way I feel about it.
Census, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Because existing surveys have all of that information to be able to correlate.
And it's really a boundary line adjustment.
Yeah.
Yeah, it
Right,
is.
that's-
It is.
It's not even a subdivision.
It's not a
it doesn't
Not the
even-
subdivision, yeah. Yep.
Okay, so,
And they'll be recording new deeds
Yeah.
along with this, which will,
Right, but this boundary line adjustment would be permanent. Anything beyond this would then become a subdivision. Correct? Because now you have two separate
Maybe.
properties owned by two separate people.
Yeah, it depends,
It
Dave, I
depends.
think.
oh,
Yeah.
Because, for instance, a lot that's not even being talked about they may sell a piece of that to that upper northern corner, and then it may be another boundary line adjustment. See what I
well, if
mean?
they're creating if they're creating a new parcel, a new lot,
That's my point.
then that's a subdivision.
That's correct.
That's all I was trying
A
to.
boundary line is you're just moving a boundary and you're just adjusting the acreages to then. But for creating a new lot, then it's a subdivision.
That was my point. Thank you.
so for the purposes of our application, we don't have an owner for Lot B yet.
Not yet, not currently.
Okay, not on record, right. Should we-
Both lots A and B are owned by the counselors currently.
Right.
Lot A is under contract of purchase.
Yeah. I mean, usually with a boundary line adjustment, we've got two parties.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it does that.
Adjusting.
Kunzler owns that other part. I mean, he owns.
Right.
We're talking of Kunzler and then the new owners of Lot A.
Right. Right.
There were 2 lots before this evening, before the event began.
So
There was an A and a B.
Okay.
We're adjusting the boundary line between A and B, so we're okay. From now on, I mean, now that A is after this, A will be separated off, that will only leave B. Anything that you do with B would then be a subdivision, because there is no other lot, correct? Owned by the same person. That's my logic from earlier.
I still think that this is kind of getting off the point, but
It
I
is.
still think if somebody at the northern point purchased some land from the future owner,
Sure.
then they may just be adding to their lot, which
Okay.
would be another boundary.
And I agree, I agree with you on that one. yeah.
Okay, so let's get back to the application. So we've got 5 items here. Do we have proposed changes to the boundary lines? Yes. Right. Everybody satisfied with that? The name and address of the professional preparer? Yes.
There's for some reason I'm missing.
Numerical and graphic scale of plan, date, and north
For some reason
arrow?
I'm missing whatever
There.
Yes.
I think that's,
Existing features and facilities, including roads, public utilities, and utility easements, wooded areas, structures, watercourses, ledge, wet areas, steep slopes, and rights-of-way. And location map. Okay, so I think we've got everything we need for this. The question now is, there are 2 requests?
Yes. First request being the waiver for the exemption of requiring the entire parcel to be surveyed.
I think we need
And
a
then
motion,
the
right?
contingency for the state
approval
wastewater.
of the state wastewater permit.
I think that's 2 separate motions. But
Do you want to discuss the wastewater
Yes.
portion? I think it makes sense to just be able to approve it and have it conditional on it, just because it takes so long to design wastewater and then to get approval from the state, and it's still, the new owner would still be held to that.
Especially since we're talking about a new system, new septic.
Yes.
So even if the approval comes months later, the boundary line adjustment, I don't know, would still stand. There's still a condition.
Even if there was no approval, it would stand, wouldn't it? The boundary line adjustment.
Yeah, it doesn't really have an impact.
Right, doesn't
They just
impact the boundary line adjustment, does it?
Yeah, originally, when we first submitted this paperwork, we had no knowledge that it was a failed system. We were just going to be asking for an exemption letter from the state for this lot A to include that easement to lot B. Now that it has been potentially deemed a failed system, it will actually be on a faster track within the state permitting process, and just create more use for that easement.
Okay, does anyone want, Sherman?
My question is, does approval or non-approval of the wastewater permit impact the boundary line adjustment?
yes.
It does?
Yes, it does. Yes. They have to get that to make this fly, basically. They need to get the permit to make this boundary line adjustment
So
stand.
we've been saying both things here.
Because right now, they're working off of a failed system, and they need a new septic system.
I understand.
So,
I understand. But I thought, and I may be wrong, but it just appears to me that that's independent of the boundary line adjustment. I realize that in order for it to function, for them, they need it. But to do the boundary line adjustment,
We actually do now need that, because it needs to be contingent, because since this system has failed, this isn't a we could have approved the boundary line adjustment with just an easement here with no system.
Right.
But now that this system has potentially failed and they need this, it does need to be contingent.
From their perspective, not from a boundary line adjustment perspective.
Sure it does, because they're going to have to use this area. That means in order to make this, we have to approve it that way. Contingent upon
I understand, okay, but they could have this property with no easement, and that's a problem for the owner, but that's not a problem as far as the boundary line adjustment is concerned. Is that correct, or am I missing it?
Yeah, no, I agree with you, because they could come back in for another boundary line adjustment if they needed more land.
Right.
Like suppose they need.
If I could speak to that quick, so to do this boundary line adjustment on Lot A, because it is being reduced in size, we needed to seek approval from the state for a statement that it will not have any adverse effects on water and wastewater disposal systems. I believe the soils within Lot A are not as well suited for a wastewater system. That's why the easement has been chosen in its location.
And that's why we initially wanted to wait until that
Yes.
permit had been finalized.
Yes.
All right, thanks.
Yeah.
And it's been finalized?
No.
No. It's just been starting
It
to.
just got more complicated.
Yeah.
So we can approve it contingent on them
Contingent
getting the.
on state
Alright.
wastewater permitting.
Yeah. And we would just sit on it, and you would hold it, Barb, until that permit finally comes through, and then
And we do that all the
we're
time.
done.
So there's only one waiver that they're requesting? Or is it two?
Well, there's the entire lot being surveyed.
Yes,
that
that's
they're
the
asking
waiver
for. And I think we probably should,
That's one, I wrote that down.
and then this contingency.
And then a
on the
contingency.
permit.
So I would like to, just for simplicity for my own mind, I'd like to take it up as two separate motions so that we can be clear about what we're acting on.
Go for it.
And so I will make the first motion to authorize a waiver for, to waive a new survey map of the entire property, including parcels A and B.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. Dana, do you want to roll there?
I'm not really clear of what the language is for the second one, so I would defer to somebody else who knows how to state that succinctly, because
The second one is for us to approve conditionally, approve based on their getting a stormwater permit,
Wastewater.
wastewater permit.
Stormwater was earlier.
But are we asking, what I'm not clear about, and I think that's what Sherman's struggling with, I'm not clear about what the ask is on the waiver. The waiver is for what, please?
Waivers for us to withhold, waivers for us to approve what they've.
What provision
information that they've
in
given
our
us, the
regulations are
boundary
we
line.
waiving? That's what I want to know, and that's why I'm not clear about that.
It's a state that it has to go
Let's not call it a waiver, maybe it'll be.
Yeah, it's not a waiver.
More acceptable,
Okay.
it's not a
So
waiver.
I wrote down, I was only taking notes,
Yeah.
and I wrote down two waivers that were requested. If that's not the issue, then help clarify for me, that's why I chose
waiver
that.
once
No, I think Sherman was on the right track.
Okay.
Our approval will be contingent on,
On
Approval of what,
the
please?
state's approval of the wastewater permit.
Yes.
What do we,
Good.
yep, is there a second?
Second.
Thanks.
discussion? I'm still not clear on what we're acting on. I'm sorry, maybe I'm done.
We're approving
What?
the boundary line adjustment,
Okay, thank you.
contingent upon them getting the wastewater permit.
At which time, we have that, Barbara will do the final sign and
yeah.
it'll be done.
Maybe you can use the new stamp, I don't know.
Yeah, essentially we're not asking for the approval until this wastewater permit is completed.
Yeah.
On state approval of the wastewater permit.
Oh, if it's approved contingent, then once they get it, you can just sign it. We don't have to wait for a meeting and go through all of it.
That's how we usually do it.
Yeah.
Okay, there
Now
was
I'm
a
clear.
second?
There was a second.
There was a
That
second.
was the second.
Okay, yep. Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of this contingency on the state wastewater permit, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes. Anything else for Ian?
No.
Ian, anything else for us? Probably want to get rid of us.
Wasn't that bad?
Nice seeing you again.
Yeah. That's all I need to do right
I'm glad, Bill, you have to do the minutes and not me on this one.
Thank goodness for, digital videotape.
I think I figured it out by the end.
Next.
Okay. I'm Raymond Page, the guy that surveyed that just left. I'm Mary Beth. How are you?
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you again.
You too.
So I am actually here, and I dropped off a couple copies, and I told Ian he had much better props than I do, so I apologize. There should be a couple copies of this, I thought. Bill, are those?
That's everything that was given to me.
Okay. Does anybody? Okay. So we must have
We
a
can
copy.
share. Oh, we do have-
Yeah, so you can do
have
that.
one large one.
Okay. I have one. I would have two.
Well, we can go.
I apologize profusely for being so underprepared.
This is for presentation purposes.
Well, we'll go like this, because we can do a lot of the same things. So this is, if you don't mind walking around, I can sort of point out things, might be a little easier. So this is the John Gerlach property. My name is Raymond Page. John Gerlach is the butter to Peter Kunzler. So this is actually just down the road on Tamarack Lane. And what John is essentially requesting is a boundary line adjustment. Right now he has two parcels, okay, and these are pre-existing that were pre-surveyed on file as part of the overall, that Kunzler property was Hay, I believe, and it was surveyed in 1984. So I think it's Diane Hay, if memory serves. But the whole piece was chunked out of that piece. So what he has is currently, both owned by Gerlach, is C1A and C1B. And he received those C1A and C1B. And this is the original line between those two parcels.
Property line right there between.
Right, original, you know how you.
But he's owned both.
He owns both, but he received them as, right, so this is,
the original?
the original line is this,
So is that the property line
right.
here?
So,
And then they're putting it.
right, so what he wants to do, C1B, which is this rear lot, okay, C1B, was originally serviced, or still is, I guess. There's a 50-foot wide right-of-way, okay? And that is over lot C1A. So what what John wants to do, he is looking to sell the house. The rear of it is completely undeveloped field. He's looking to sell the house, but he does not want a right-of-way. He wants to own the property and fee access to his lot. So what he wants to do is, instead of a right-of-way, it'll be a strip owned in fee added to C1B.
Yep.
Now, he's taking land from C1B, so he wants to change this little triangle piece in the back.
Okay, so there.
So he's abandoning this, wants to add this to C1B, and because he's taking land here, is adding more. And it also makes more sense. There's a stone wall that it follows, and right now this cuts across his lawn. So,
Yes, yes.
you know, this cuts across his lawn. He wants to follow this stone wall and then back. So essentially, you guys got it, right?
Yeah.
I know. I already talked with Howard, so I know he
Yeah, we're good.
So I already
They're creating a corridor that provides access to B and
Correct.
turning property from B to A.
Yes, sir.
To make up for the difference.
yes,
Although the corridor is less land than the triangle.
That is correct.
Okay.
What is the access to A?
A right here is
right
the
here,
driveway.
yeah.
So they front on.
On the road, Tamarack Lane.
Yes.
Yep.
The new driveway would be on the right of way.
Well, the A would still retain its same
Right, the new
driveway.
drive,
A driveway would come from here.
Yes, if
presumably,
they
along
were
the
to,
new
that would be
property.
the access that,
Talking about this
that
here.
he would use if
Yeah.
he were to develop that. As it stands right now, there's nothing back there, and I don't think there's any intention at this point to do anything back there. He wants to sell the house, but wants to.
But you don't want it to be landlocked if he wants to
Absolutely
sell the
right.
parcel.
Yes, sir.
Otherwise, you can't do anything with it.
Yes,
You
sir.
can't get there legally, but.
Right. So that's what he wants to do. And it's a little bit convoluted, and hopefully I explained it so that everybody understands what he wants to do. So end result is he's starting with 2 lots, and he's going to end with 2 lots, just wants to reconfigure the boundaries between them.
Motion to approve the boundary line adjustment proposed by John Gerlach.
You did a very good job of explaining it.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate it.
do we need to go through the, anything on the list of 5 that's not there?
Isn't that in discussion or no?
It could be. Is there a second?
Oh, second.
Okay, thanks, Amy. And discussion. So do we have everything here? Proposed changes to the boundary lines.
Yep.
Yes.
Name and address of professional preparer. Guess that's you.
Yes.
Yep.
I believe. Yes, ma'am.
Numerical and graphic scale of plan, date, and north arrow.
Yep. Yep.
You. Existing features and facilities. Not sure there's much there.
Well, there's nothing in B, right? It's only in A. And is that everything?
Roads,
Just a
public
field now.
utilities.
Right.
Okay, and a location map. Is there?
Yes.
Yep.
That's there too? Okay. Okay, any further discussion? A little bit easier.
Just,
Yes, sir.
wait, I just noticed one thing. I see Rutland Town, we've got Proctor.
Oh,
Yeah.
you know what? You recycled these maps. I'll correct that. I apologize. You recycled these location maps.
Yeah,
And it's not the location map is,
That should be Pittsford.
yes.
The map is correct. It's
The
just
map
this-
is correct.
Yeah.
It's,
Just Pittsford.
yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for pointing that out. Are all of them?
Yeah, they are.
Yeah.
So what are we looking at here?
This should be
the,
Pittsford. Obviously, you don't
Okay.
elect Proctor
Yeah, right,
there,
right.
so, but everything else is correct. You know, that's the first mistake I've made. Thank you for pointing that out. I make plenty.
Looks good. No, that's good plat.
We don't need to make the motion contingent on that, changing
I
that.
don't think so.
I will change that.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of this boundary line adjustment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Done deal.
Thank you very much.
See, the trick is always to come with less information.
The trick. Good deal. See, I thought Ian, I felt horrible. He had me all outclassed with his. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes.
We'll talk.
See you. Yep.
See you later.
See ya.
Aye.
Okay. The enhanced energy plan has passed the select board. The vote was last Tuesday. It was 4-0. There was one member not in attendance, Joe DiNardo, but everyone there voted for it that evening. It now, so the municipal plan has been readopted. It goes to the Regional Planning Commission to get its approval for that.
So the energy plan had the added item.
Item 10, there was
Yes,
discussion.
yes, 10 stayed in.
Okay.
There was one paragraph that they wanted taken out. And it was like on the second page or something. It was about something about the current energy use. It really wasn't. And some reference to, fossil fuels and the costs and general costs and all that kind of stuff. couple minor formatting changes, but other than that, it was what we passed, with the exception of Criterion 10. And so, it's gone. It should be no problem. I don't expect any problems with the Regional Planning Commission, and they should take it up. They should take it up on let's see, October or November. That map, that always gets me to the 19th, yeah. So that's that. Dana, do you want to talk about the status of the committee for the transparency policy?
From what I understand, based on last time's meeting, there were 3 members, and we were going to touch base with, no, not the last meeting. I was not present at the last meeting. At the last meeting in which I was in attendance, there were 2 volunteers from the Planning Commission who agreed to serve on a committee to just develop and review some of the recommendations that we have put in and discussed on the transparency documents, and those were Norman Cohen and Sherman Hunter.
I thought you also had volunteered.
Well, I was appointed as the chair. I don't know that, I said I would happily serve.
Okay.
But 2 volunteers joined me because most of the work that was presented was mine. So 2 people, from what I understand, joined to form that committee, which I said I would happily chair. And then the question was if we wanted to have someone else. Jerry's name came up, and Sherman and Jerry have had a conversation, and I think Jerry has agreed to join our group.
Appointed by Sherman.
I recruited you.
Oh.
So I think that completes the committee. We'll take that under advisement, look at the document that we last examined, make any final recommendations, and then bring it back for discussion.
Okay.
And potential, I would assume at that point, potential action of some kind or another.
Have you decided on when you'll be meeting, or?
Since the information just came around in between the in between the public hearing and this meeting.
It's a long no.
We will be figuring that out, I think, after this meeting.
Offline.
But
When's our next
I'm assuming that it will be before our next
When is our next meeting?
This is the 24th.
17th of November, maybe 14th of November. It's whatever the
Planning Commission, sure.
14th, yeah.
14th of November. Yep. So our goal, I think, would be to meet before that next meeting. If that's not possible, then it will be before our December meeting, I guess.
Okay, sounds good. And that's a nice segue to the next topic, which is the 6:30 start time. We initially said we'd try this for 3 meetings, and that this is the 3rd meeting, I believe. So, on the 14th, do we want to keep it at 6:30, or do we want to move it back to 7?
I'm in favor of 7.
I so like having it at 6:30, but I have trouble getting here. On some, I mean, I have another meeting that conflicts on some Thursdays, not every one.
Right.
Tonight was one, and I have another one in December, so I think 7 would work better for me.
6:30 was working fine with me. I don't know. There's some of you guys that have, Jerry, you got.
I mentioned to Andy, I really like getting done at 8:30. I like that,
So
which
do I.
means that I probably like the 6:30 start time, but it's just a little bit of a struggle for me getting out of work to get here at 6:30, but I really like being done at 8:30.
I agree with it doesn't really matter to me, 6:30 or 7. I'm neutral on that. But I do like getting out a little bit earlier. It's nice. I don't know, but it depends on what we're doing, obviously.
I would not object to it. I will struggle to get here.
How about you, Barbara?
I like the 6:30.
How about you, Danny?
I think the 6:30s have it.
Coming from Middlebury, it has been a challenge. I said that I would happily try to do whatever the will of the board is, but 6:30 is near impossible. But of the 3 meetings, I've been close to on time for 6:30, but and there was one that I was not able to make because that was a conflict, so I wasn't going to make that at all. But 6:30 is a real challenge, but I'll go with the will of the group.
Say 6:45, but that would probably be harder to remember. So maybe
We'll never
not.
remember. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we haven't had any problems with the quorum at 6:30. We could try to do 7 and try to wrap meetings up sooner.
I think the 6:30s have it.
Okay, Andy.
No, really, I mean, every,
You know, maybe, how about we do
Yeah,
this?
this-
Why don't we do the 6:30 and we see how it goes with kind of stepping through the meeting, and if we start getting done at, half an hour early, we're almost a half an hour early tonight. I don't know if there's more to say, but maybe then we can adjust the start time because we'd be done at 8:30.
And maybe we just make it, if we started at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, we get done at 8.
And we make it a point that if we're going to go past 8:30, then we either announce a special meeting or we
We
postpone
try to
it
start
the next
earlier
day.
or something,
Yeah,
knowing if
something.
it's gonna be, that's a good idea.
Because I will just say that if we were to put it to a vote in terms of whether I will vote for 6:30 or 7 o'clock, I will vote for 7 o'clock. Because that's more responsible.
Well, let's just do a show of hands.
Yeah.
Close enough that I'm a little uncertain. So 6:30 start time, keeping it at that.
I'd prefer that.
well, 6:30's fine.
Let's try that, see if we
I'm
can,
just-
see if we can kind of move
I
it
don't
a
want to
little
vote.
bit.
I mean, either one works for me. I like 6:30, but it's hard for me to get it.
I'm similar in fairness.
Yeah.
Well, let's just get in practice of making them briefer meetings.
See what we can do.
Well, I'll move that we make 6:30 our regular start time from here on out.
Just a second.
Second.
If you're making a motion, it's got a voice vote, and I know how I'll vote, but that's okay.
Well,
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Okay. Okay, 6:30 on the 14th. Minutes for October 3rd. They look pretty good, Bill.
Can I make a motion
You sure can.
to approve them as written?
I'll second.
Anything people would like to change or any discussion? Okay, all those in favor of the minutes for October 3rd as written, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Abstain. Not present.
Anything else?